everyone, my name is Eric Hopkins, aka JEL. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So, WWE and their draft. That was the big story for this week. So, let's get into it here. We'll start off with last Friday night SmackDown. We'll get into Monday Night Raw here. So, without further ado, let's get going here. SmackDown began with Paul Heyman starting out the show saying that Roman Reigns has excluded his name or he has removed his name from the draft eligibility pool here going into the draft. So basically, what it says to me is either he's going to stay on SmackDown as he was already, or whenever he decides to come back, WWE wants to have the option to throw him on whatever show they deem necessary. It sounds like it will be on SmackDown because that's kind of where the biggest storylines for Roman Reigns are probably still going to be with the people who were still on that show after the draft. So yeah, with that being said, SmackDown opened up, which I thought was interesting. It started out with the contract signing with AJ Styles and Cody Rhodes signing their contract for their upcoming title match at WWE Backlash in France. I remember last week on my WWE recap report, I said, it's probably going to end up being one of the typical wrestling contract signings because there's never a contract signing that usually goes according to plan that just ends amicably between the two competitors. Well, guess what? This week they did exactly that. And this was, yes, they threw verbal jabs at each other a little bit. Basically AJ Styles saying, "You got the title, I want it." Cody Rhodes says, "I have the title, I don't want to give it up yet. And by the way, my dad's name's Dusty Rhodes." So yeah, it was kind of, it just felt like it really was kind of uneventful, but at the same time, it was kind of refreshing to see a contract signing that did not end in some sort of physicality here. They shook hands. Of course, it was pretty stern. And AJ Styles walked away, and they both kind of was expecting the other one to hit each other, and it never happened. And AJ Styles just walked away, and it was like it was a rare moment of a contract signing just goes according to plan. And so, in that regard, I thought that was kind of cool and kind of refreshing. So, in that regards, I kind of enjoyed it. Outside of that, I feel like there's really not been a whole lot of story build for this match. It's all about competition, which is perfectly fine. Like I said, I just got done watching Will Ospreay versus Bryan Danielson for basically the same sort of reasons. This is for a title, and AJ Styles earned the number one contendership, and that's all that you really have to show for a good match. So you don't have to always have this elaborate, drawn out storyline for a match to make sense and be a lot of fun at a pay per view. So I'm sure this match is going to deliver. It's going to be a lot of fun. Like I said, I expect Cody Rhodes to completely retain the title here. But all in all, I think it's going to be a fun match to watch at Backlash, and it's going to be a great main event for that show. After this, we started to get into the actual WWE draft, which I ain't going to lie. I mentioned this on our Dragon's Den podcast, episode number 7. If you want to see me and the Dragon's Den crew get into night 1 of the draft over there, we also go over the NFL draft, and I'll be putting some clipped out versions of the NFL draft talk on my channel. But for the WWE draft on SmackDown, we go into some in depth of the first night over there. But I mentioned on that show that I thought that the first night of SmackDown, the draft was completely underwhelming. Overall, there were more moves to different shows that I thought there would be. But the first night for sure, I was very let down with the amount of movement between shows because it seemed like a lot of the draft selections that we got, like on round 1 here, for instance, Bianca Belair, Jey Uso, and Seth Rollins were already on the shows that they were drafted to. So to me, it kind of felt like a bit of a waste of time for the most part, especially when it comes to the heavy hitters on the rosters. Obviously, the champions were barred from the draft because they were the champions and they were protected on those given shows. So I understand that rule, and it kind of took away some of the surprise elements of it because of that fact. But at the same time, I understand wanting to keep the champions on those shows. So Carmelo Hayes in round 1 here was a surprise. I mean, not too surprising because it's about time they finally called him up from the NXT roster and brought him over to one of the main roster shows. SmackDown, I think, will serve him well, and he obviously challenged Cody Rhodes here after he was announced for the show, and it was going to be the main event match on SmackDown. Outside of that, there really wasn't a whole lot storyline wise on SmackDown. To me, they kind of furthered a little bit of the Kevin Owens stuff, and they built a couple matches for Backlash, which I'll get into in a minute. But other than that, I just felt like SmackDown was mostly centered around the draft. Raw kind of was too. Raw had a few other storyline elements we'll get to in a little bit, but I thought for the most part that's kind of the most important thing. And I'll get into the match between Cody and Carmelo in just a minute. So round 1, like I said, was Bianca Belair to SmackDown, Jey Uso to Raw, Carmelo Hayes to SmackDown and Seth Rollins to Raw. Then let's go ahead and go over the night one drafts here. Round two was Randy Orton to SmackDown, Breaker to Raw, Nia Jax to SmackDown, and Liv Morgan to Raw. Again, Braun Breaker kind of, I guess, was still an NXT star, I suppose, but he's been making appearances on Raw and SmackDown. I think mostly Raw at this point. I think and Nia Jax is obviously was a Raw superstar, moved over to SmackDown. So a little bit of movement, but it felt like a lot of the movement in the draft was mainly from mid carders or undercarders for the most part. The main eventers pretty much stayed where they wanted them to be, and that's kind of where they were already. So, like I said, in that regard, it kind of took a little bit out of it for me, and it made it feel a little bit boring, to be completely honest with you. Round three, LA Knight remained on SmackDown, Ricochet remained on Raw, the Bloodline remained on SmackDown, and Sheamus remained on Raw. So round three on Friday night, everything kind of, like I said, stayed exactly where it was. They built a little bit of drama around the Bloodline not being drafted till round three. They kind of did something similar with Drew McIntyre on Monday Night Raw. All of it kind of really didn't really lead anywhere for the most part. Just kind of building up a little bit of suspense and drama, like, oh, where are the big names going to get drafted at? And they just got drafted where they were normally were already anyway. So at least I'll say this: I have more faith in Hunter as a booker to not do what Vince McMahon did and just kind of ignore the draft after the next, first week or two, and then have the wrestlers go be jumping on to different shows, just depending on where they want them at any given time. I'm hoping that Hunter will kick this to more of a hard roster split and will actually just keep them on Raw and SmackDown where they've been drafted and focus on those shows. However, I feel like there is a potential since a lot of wrestlers did not switch brands. There were some, and I'll get into the amount here just a little bit. So it's not as bad as some people are making it out to be, and even myself included, who I felt like it really wasn't doing a whole lot of jumping going on. But I'm just hoping that Hunter will. There's a possibility where we could be getting some rematches by the end of the summer that we've already been seeing over the last year or so, because a lot of these guys have been on the same show for a long while now, and with nobody really jumping back and forth as much as I thought, it could become problematic. But we'll have to wait and see if that happens. However, like I said, it's not as bad as some people are making it out to be, as I'll get into here in just a minute. But then we also had round four here. AJ Styles remained on SmackDown. Alpha Academy remained on Raw. Andrade moved to SmackDown. That was interesting. I mean, he just kind of got back. He's really not done a whole lot since. So hopefully he'll fit in better on SmackDown. Maybe he can kind of get pushed a little bit more to the main event level over there. You could have him feuding with Santos Escobar. That could be really cool. And then, of course, Kiana James got called up from NXT. So that's a good call up there. Quite a few NXT call-ups, which I was happy to see. Vince didn't really like doing that a whole lot because I feel like he sometimes thought that NXT was being run better than him, and his ego didn't really like the fact that NXT was being run better than some of the main rosters. So I think he kind of held some resentment for some of the NXT talent at times, because he'd call him up like Karrion Kross and did have him beat by Jeff Hardy in 10 seconds or something like that. Things like that. It just kind of really made it seem like that Vince didn't want any of the NXT roster. I think he'd have loved a guy like Braun Breaker and things like that. But yeah, so interesting to see a lot of NXT talents called up. Hopefully that doesn't do a whole lot of damage to the NXT brand. I know they got a lot of good talent down there, so I'm sure they'll be perfectly fine. So that pretty much did it for the actual draft portion of SmackDown. Like I said, pretty kind of underwhelming on that night alone. But when you look back on it in totality here, that we'll do here in a little bit, it actually makes a lot of sense. But SmackDown also did have a few things on there, such as we got a few matches for Backlash. We've got it confirmed that Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill will be challenging the Kabuki Warriors for the Women's Tag Team Championships here. Obviously we've seen, Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair wrestle at a few matches together, but not very many. So it feels a little early for them to be getting a tag championship match. However, there's one match on Monday Night Raw this week where I know everybody was giving AEW crap for Mercedes Moné coming into the company and not even having a single match yet and getting a tag or getting a title opportunity. So again, it's just one of those things where they'll crap on AEW for it, but when WWE does it, it's not that big a deal. We'll get into that when we get into Monday Night Raw here in a little bit. But at least in this case, we had them, compete at least a 6-man at WrestleMania or 6-woman at WrestleMania. So, but at the same time, I just feel like it's just a little early on if you're going to go by wins and losses. But pro wrestling doesn't always go by wins and losses. AEW sometimes does, but not. It's not always as important as it appears. Obviously, I would prefer if you do it that way because it gives it more of a sports oriented feel to it. But sometimes pro wrestling just wants to throw tag teams together, and sometimes they want to put them in title matches, and that's just the way it goes. Unfortunately, like it or not, that's just kind of the way it is. We also got the announcement on SmackDown of Randy Orton and Kevin Owens versus Solo Sikoa and Tama Tonga in a tag match at Backlash. I think this could very well be where we see the debut of Jacob Fatu. I'm going to call that out right now that he'll probably help the Bloodline win this match. Obviously, Randy Orton come out and aided Kevin Owens in the brawl that he had with Tama Tonga and Solo Sikoa, the new Bloodline here. So this could be a lot of fun. But like I said, I'm calling it right now. I think Jacob Fatu will be debuting here to expand this new Bloodline, as it were, under the leadership of Solo Sikoa. And on SmackDown, we also got the confirmation of a triple threat women's WWE Championship match here between Naomi, Bailey, and Tiffany Stratton, who cost Naomi her WWE Women's Championship match against Bailey last week on SmackDown. So Naomi is still getting her opportunity here with Tiffany Stratton thrown in the mix as well. Championship or champion's disadvantage, I should say. But I think at the end of the day, it'll probably be Bailey coming out on top again here moving forward. So it should be a fun match between these three ladies. They've been doing some good work, and I'm really interested to see what Tiffany Stratton's got in the women's main event picture here. So we'll see what she does as well. They seem to be very high on Tiffany Stratton, so I'm interested to see what else they do with her moving forward. SmackDown, like I said, ended with Cody Rhodes versus Carmelo Hayes. Cody Rhodes gets the win there. Interesting that you brought up Carmelo Hayes from the NXT roster and you immediately beat him on the main roster. However, like I've said on many other wrestling shows, you could have a great showing against, and in this case, it's WWE's champion. The WWE champion is not going to lose, especially heading into a championship defense this weekend against AJ Styles. But you could have a wrestler lose, have a great showing in that loss, and the loss actually elevate the person while losing. So in this case, I thought Carmelo Hayes did that. There was a wonky spot in the middle of the match where Carmelo Hayes and Cody Rhodes kind of both went for a springboard cutter at the same time, and they kind of crossed and missed each other. I don't know exactly what was going on there. I don't know if they were supposed to hit each other or if the timing was just off. It just looked a little weird. It's just one of those things. It's like, if AEW would have done it, people on the internet would have been crapping all over it. So it's just fair to point out, every single wrestling company is going to have botches. That's the way it goes. People kind of they take it a little too far. They get a little overblown about it. But at the same time, I think it's just something that just happens. But overall, I thought these two had a pretty good showing together. Like I said, Carmelo Hayes in the loss, but at the same time, I think it did a decent job of elevating him as a main event level talent, or at least a mid card talent on SmackDown being just brought up from NXT. So I can't wait to see what they do with him moving forward. Obviously, he'll have a great future on SmackDown, and I think Cody Rhodes was a good person to kind of bring him in and have that measuring stick against Cody Rhodes on his first night. So overall, good showing for Carmelo Hayes. Night 2 of the draft on Monday Night Raw started up in Kansas City, Missouri, with Logan Paul showing up to the show, and who would be there right next to him besides his lackey over there? Of course, was the Super Bowl champion, 3-time Super Bowl champion, Patrick Mahomes from the Kansas City Chiefs. Interesting that they got him to appear on this show. Anytime you could get the reigning Super Bowl champion quarterback, who is pretty much considered as the best quarterback in the league as of right now, to be on your wrestling show, it's a big coup for WWE. And there was a couple spots where they had him on the show as well, which I'll get into it just a little bit. Yeah, it was good to see. I guess Patrick Mahomes. I'm not a big Kansas City Chiefs fan personally, and part of me doesn't want to see them win anymore. I'm kind of sick of that. Not because they're winning, it's because I want my team to win for a change, I guess. But nothing against them personally, I suppose. But yeah, interesting. He's wearing Logan Paul's Prime necklace and things like that. It's a little bit of product placement there as well. Yeah, it was interesting to see this, obviously, to start off the show. Raw started out with Becky Lynch in the middle of the ring. She cut a promo just discussing her recent Women's World Championship victory here last week in the Battle Royal, eliminating Liv Morgan at the very final elimination there. And of course, that brought out Liv Morgan, and Liv Morgan, was running her mouth as well. And then Nia Jax come out, who recently drafted to SmackDown. Nia Jax said that she was basically going to prove her dominance here. So it set up a match between Liv Morgan and Nia Jax for later on in the show. Just kind of felt like something for Nia Jax to do on her last night on Raw. It did a good job, I think, of setting up Liv Morgan going for the Women's World Championship here against Becky Lynch in the future. But we'll get into that once we get into the Liv Morgan and Nia Jax match. Much like on SmackDown, the show basically, was centered around the entire draft. There were 6 rounds on this night, obviously, with Raw going first. But again, kind of more of the same when it comes to most of the main event talents were sticking to the shows they were on. Imperium with Gunther and Ludwig Kaiser. No Giovanni Vinci, as they mentioned since last week. It appears that they have dumped him from the Imperium group. They stay on Raw. Jade Cargill stays on SmackDown with Bianca Belair. The Damage Control, that was a move that was one of the bigger moves, I thought, in my opinion. The entire group, including the women's tag team champions, will be moving over to Raw. However, I think Cargill and Bianca Belair are going to win those titles at Backlash this Saturday. So I'm sure that'll just put these ladies over here on Raw. Kevin Owens stays on SmackDown as well. Round two saw CM Punk staying on Raw. The Pride, Bobby Lashley's crew, stayed over on SmackDown. Braun Strowman, interestingly enough, they announced this before they showed his return later on in the show. That was intriguing enough, but I guess he was already on Raw anyway, from what I understand. So same thing there. And Tiffany Stratton, all these here, all again, were on the show that they were drafted to here. So not a whole lot of moving there. Again, that kind of bugs me especially when we've had shows in the past, like the number one overall pick was like John Cena. It was a big surprise about he was switching shows. He was the champion at the time. And like I said, I understand the champions stay where they were, but it just lacked that uh, unpredictability element here on the draft, and it just felt like we're just sticking to the status quo. But like I said, we'll get into a little bit how it's not exactly that here in a minute. Round three at least saw a few moves going around here. LWO, the entire group, including Carlito, by the way, who just turned on Rey Mysterio and Dragon Lee on SmackDown this last week, is also jumping over to Raw. So I'm assuming Carlito will probably be on his own. That's interesting. I thought maybe he was going to be joining Legado del Fantasma over on SmackDown, but that doesn't appear to be the case. So maybe Carlito's getting a bit of a singles run here, which I'm all for. I love Carlito. But interesting that they're all going to be making a jump over to Raw, with Dominic Mysterio, I believe, is still on Raw as well. So that'll be interesting. With Legado del Fantasma staying over there on SmackDown, Drew McIntyre staying on Raw, and Shinsuke Nakamura, one of the bigger moves, is moving over to SmackDown. Shinsuke Nakamura being on SmackDown will be a good addition over there. There's some good baby faces he could get a good run with. I think LA Knight would be a great one. Kevin Owens would be another one. There's a lot of good matches he can have over there on SmackDown. So I'm interested to see what they do with him over there. Round four, obviously, the Judgment Day stays on Raw. I'm assuming this means Rhea Ripley as well, even though she's not going to be back for a while. I guess she could conceivably go to either show, but I'm pretty sure she'll end up on Raw as well with some of the storylines they're building over there with the Judgment Day as well. Obviously, Damian Priest is not listed here with the Judgment Day because he is the world heavyweight champion here, so he's been excluded from the draft. But he is also going to be staying on Monday Night Raw. Naomi obviously stays on SmackDown. The Mad Dragon, Ilya Dragunov, is getting his NXT call up here. So that's a great thing to see. He's going to be on the same brand as Gunther as well, so that'll be a lot of fun. Then, of course, Chelsea Green and Piper Niven, I believe I can't remember what show they were on. They might have made the move as well. But yes, they move over to SmackDown in the women's tag division over there. So a couple moves. Definitely the NXT call up. I like that one. Round five saw the New Day being drafted to Monday Night Raw, where they already were. Pretty Deadly was already on SmackDown, I believe. Lyra Valkyria from NXT coming up to Raw. So yeah, I'm interested to see what some of these young ladies are. I don't watch a lot of NXT, like I said, but good to see some of these ladies getting called up to the main roster. So I'm hoping that'll build up the women's division here in WWE. It sounds like Hunter might have some good plans for them, so I'm excited about that. And of course, then we got Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell moving over to SmackDown for Monday Night Raw. So that's a bit of a switch. And of course, to go with Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell moving over to SmackDown, DIY is also moving over to SmackDown. So if they want to ever rebuild the way from NXT with Gargano, Candice LeRae, Indy Hartwell, and Dexter Loomis, they could do that, especially if Tommaso Ciampa continues to be frustrated. That he could go off on his own on SmackDown. Another guy who would be a great challenger for like Cody Rhodes, Tommaso Ciampa, he'd be a great competitor for that title. But we'll have to see what they do with that. It could be more of a U.S. championship thing for the time being. We'll have to wait and see. The Final Testament moving over to Monday Night Raw. I don't really care about this faction. They need to do more to build them, in my opinion. Maybe they'll get that opportunity over on Monday Night Raw. We'll just have to wait and see. Big Bronson Reed stays on Raw, and Blair Davenport coming up from NXT to go to SmackDown. So again, another NXT ladies call up. And it was nice to see some of these women being announced for the draft from NXT, like Lyra Valkyria and I believe Blair Davenport. I think obviously neither one of them had an idea that they were even being called up at all. So you can tell it really affected them emotionally. And I thought that was a really good moment to kind of drop a little bit of a surprise on them. So that's great to see. So yes, I can't wait to see what these young ladies do on the main roster. Definitely got some room for some new talent up there. So can't wait to see what they do with the women's division in AEW and WWE at this point, both of which have tremendous possibilities with some of the new signings and call-ups that they've been doing here lately. So overall, the WWE draft, like I said, felt a bit underwhelming to me in times, especially when it comes to the main event talent jumping back and forth. However, Carmelo Hayes moving to SmackDown, Braun Breaker moves to Raw, Nia Jax moves to SmackDown, Sheamus moves to Raw, which I thought Sheamus was already kind of on Raw. That's just me personally. Andrade moves to SmackDown, Kiana James moves to Raw, Baron Corbin also moves back to SmackDown after being on NXT for a while. Did a lot of good for him on NXT, teaming up with Braun Breaker down there. Alba Fire and Isla Dawn moved to Raw. The entire Damage Control moves to Raw. Braun Strowman returns to Raw. Again, he was kind of already on Raw. LWO moves to Raw. Shinsuke Nakamura moves to SmackDown. Ilya Dragunov moves to Raw. Chelsea Green and Piper Niven moved to SmackDown. Lyra Valkyria moves to Raw. Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell moved to SmackDown. Karrion Kross in the Final Testament moved to Raw. DIY moved to SmackDown. And Blair Davenport, uh, Bea Priestley moves to SmackDown. So those are all the moves that were actually to a different show than what they were actually on. So again, a lot of this outside of Carmelo Hayes, Braun Breaker, which those are basically NXT call-ups. A lot of NXT call-ups were the biggest moves, in my opinion, for the draft. And then we got a few names like Andrade who moved to a different show, and a couple of these like Sheamus, yeah, he just come back, but I thought he was on Raw already. Maybe he was on SmackDown. Whatever. But at the same time, I just feel like a lot of this is NXT call-ups and a few mid-carders moving here and there. It is a little bit more of a shakeup, and when you look at it with the actual list of everybody who has been moved to a different show, so it's not as bad as it originally sounded on Friday night, like we said on the Dragons Den podcast here on the channel. So all in all, I think it could be good for the show. We'll just have to wait and see how this goes once it's all finalized after Backlash next week on Monday Night Raw on May 6th. So it'll just have to wait and see how it goes, and hopefully it'll be a good thing. I just think overall the main storylines are going to be continuing where they currently are. Cody Rhodes will be on SmackDown. The World Heavyweight title will be on Raw, which is probably going to be the way it's always going to be with the titles anyway. At least we have world champions on the shows who are going to be there every single week. So it's interesting to see where this is all going to go, but I'm excited. We'll see how it goes. I can't wait to see how Ilya Dragunov and guys like Braun Breaker on Monday Night Raw with Gunther and Big Bronson Reed. That's a slobber knocker if I ever saw it, to coin a phrase from good old JR. So yeah, interested to see what they do. And I thought for the most part, I, I could have enjoyed being a little bit more surprised at certain some of these moves, but overall, it probably did its job as well as it could be. I'll give it a solid B, a B grade for the draft this year. But getting back to Monday Night Raw, the actual show, Gunther had a match with Xavier Woods. Gunther kind of wants to do it himself here after last week when Giovanni Vinci and Ludwig Kaiser failed against the New Day in tag team competition. Gunther obliterated Xavier Woods here. It was a fun match to watch, very long and drawn out. Kind of a match I actually get into where the guys literally worked hard. And I like the storytelling they're telling with Xavier Woods being last year's King of the Ring winner and Gunther basically just annihilating him. And then at the very end, kind of acting like he took the crown and then put it on his head. I really like that visual. And of course, Gunther, like I said last week, if Gunther's going to be in the King of the Ring tournament, just end the tournament now because I think Gunther is your clear cut winner. No one else is even going to come close to challenging him. Maybe Ilya Dragunov could enter the tournament so we could actually get at least a fun final out of it. But I tell you right now, Gunther is your King of the Ring champion coming out of, I believe the finals is going to be in Saudi Arabia, if I'm not mistaken. So crown him. That's just the way it's going to be. And Gunther could become King Gunther, the Ring General. So it could be a lot of fun to watch him kind of play that role over the summer. And hopefully he'll get his world championship match probably coming into the fall, maybe into the winter. Maybe he could get a title run there as well. I can't wait to see that because he's absolutely deserving of it. He's worked hard. He's busted his ass. And Gunther is probably one of the best pro wrestlers on the planet at this point. And if you're not a fan of Gunther, get on board. He's going to be your world champion sooner rather than later. We had a segment where uh, Jay Uso was in the ring, and then of course he was interrupted by Logan Paul, and I guess the Judgment Day tried to jump him before their six-man main event for the night. That is, of course, when we got the return of Braun Strowman. He made the save, and he come out to help Jay Uso here, even getting a little bit in the face of Patrick Mahomes on the outside, as Patrick Mahomes gave his 3 Super Bowl rings to Logan Paul to knock out Jay Uso. That's when Braun Strowman come out to try to make the save there. But he ended up hitting JD McDonough instead. And of course, that led to Braun Strowman going out there kind of jaw jacking with Patrick Mahomes a little bit. Patrick Mahomes kind of stood his ground, but at the same time, it's like, that's a big man, Patrick. You might want to back off a little bit here. But at the same time, it's good to see the monster among monsters back. But at the same time, I would prefer to see Braun Strowman being like a gimmick with like Uncle Howdy. I don't know if I want to see Braun Strowman just being the monster among men. Um, that gimmick's a little bit played out for me. But we'll have to wait and see what they do. Maybe when they bring in Uncle Howdy, maybe he'll recruit Braun Strowman. We'll just have to wait and see where they go with it. But we're still getting those teasers for Uncle Howdy. Mostly a QR code format. So if you want to see what's been going on with those, you can go to social media and check out. But it sounds like we could be getting close to the debut or the re-debut of Uncle Howdy as well. I don't know if it'll be at Backlash this Saturday or not, but it could definitely be something that they end up doing. So I can't wait to see what they do with it. It could be a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see Bray Wyatt, Wyndham Rotunda's legacy continued on here through his brother Bo Dallas as Uncle Howdy. During a backstage interview with Jay Uso, if you looked in the background behind Jay Uso and the interviewer, we saw Liv Morgan leave a locker room, and not long after that, we saw what looked to be Dominic Mysterio leaving that exact same locker room. Now, this is something that Hunter has been doing a lot in his shows. He'll be like, especially once when the Bray Wyatt thing, to kind of go back to the Fiend and stuff. When he was heralding his return, you'd see like QR codes in the background and stuff like that. Like you'd see like people walking around in the background of things that are going on in the foreground to kind of give you teases of where things could be going in the future. So obviously, the whole idea last week where they had Liv Morgan and Dominic Mysterio going face to face is obviously leading to something. It appears that Dominic Mysterio, now that Mommy's gone, he needs to find himself somebody else. I don't know. Dominic Mysterio's got this thing going on right now where he's like not really adhering to what the Judgment Day is really wanting him to do, and he's kind of off doing his own thing. He's definitely got this Eddie Guerrero mustache. He's got this Eddie Guerrero look about him now. Maybe he really was Dominic Mysterio's poppy back in the day. I don't know. He really looks like his son right now with the long hair and stuff like that. And even Rey Mysterio made fun of it later on, talking about it looked like Dirty Sanchez or something right there on his face. So yeah, it was a lot. That was really cool to see. But like I said, it looks like we're going to be getting some sort of storyline here with Liv Morgan and Dominic Mysterio, which will definitely play into Rhea Ripley when she returns from her injury, whenever that might be. So yeah, I can't wait to see where this goes. This is going to be very spicy when it comes to the storytelling. So can't wait to see what's going on there. We had a WWE Intercontinental Championship match: Bronson Reed versus Sami Zayn. Chad Gable, after being attacked in the back by Sami Zayn tonight, Sami Zayn kicked him in the face out of nowhere to kind of get retribution after the last couple of weeks of him being attacked by Chad Gable. So yeah, he got a little retribution there, but then Chad Gable attacked Sami Zayn during this match, costing Bronson Reed his Intercontinental Championship match here. Of course, Bronson Reed then gave a big splash to Sami Zayn, and then also took out Chad Gable as Chad Gable was basically celebrating taking out Sami Zayn here. So yeah, it looks like we're definitely going to be getting an Intercontinental Triple Threat match, possibly at Backlash this weekend. Not totally sure, but either way, it looks like this is going to be a great match, whatever happens, because all three of these guys could go. This could be a show stealer, no matter what show it's on. So I'm hoping it'll be on Backlash this weekend. But either way, I don't think that they're going to take the title off Sami Zayn right away. But if they did, I would not be upset with either one of the two guys between Bronson Reed or Chad Gable. Either way, I think it could be great. But to me, if you're asking me, Sami Zayn's going to retain. Yeah, definitely push Bronson Reed further. Bronson Reed is very underrated, and Chad Gable as well. Continue to do this push with him and what he's doing with the Alpha Academy, and I'm sure that'll eventually lead to a split between that group as well. But this could be a lot of fun, and I'm excited to see this triple threat match whenever it does occur. After this, we got the return, even though he's not been gone for very long, of CM Punk. Drew McIntyre come out a little bit earlier during one of the draft rounds, but right before he got, or right after he got selected in round 3, and was kind of complaining about how do I not get drafted before round 3? Kind of what they did with the Bloodline, like I said on SmackDown, but he was complaining about that. That's when CM Punk showed up in the skybox, and Drew McIntyre then took off, was looking for that particular skybox, and by the time he found it, Punk actually, came down and actually went into the ring. So again, kind of a little bit of mind games with Drew McIntyre here. CM Punk basically said that Drew McIntyre is the crazy ex-girlfriend he cannot get rid of. Other than that, it really didn't do a whole lot to further the feud, other than just kind of, Punk kind of one-upping Drew McIntyre a little bit here. But they're clearly leading to this now that Drew McIntyre has officially been re-signed by WWE this week. He officially put pen to paper, and he is now officially back with WWE, and so is Finn Balor, for those of you who have not heard. So WWE getting some of their stars back, no doubt about it, for the long run here, the next 2 to 3 years, I believe. So yeah, whenever CM Punk's ready to come back, this is going to be one of the biggest feuds on Monday Night Raw. So at least in that regard, I can't blame him for keeping it alive here. And that's a good thing. I know there's some trouble with AEW right now with MJF and Adam Cole. Both guys are hurt for the most part. Adam Cole's on the TV a little bit more than MJF right now, as he hasn't been on TV since December. But they're having a hard time kind of keeping that feud and that Devil storyline continuing. since the injury to both guys. But in this case, at least they're trying to make it work. At least CM Punk is still able to go on the road and cut promos, even though he's still got a bad tricep. And even Drew McIntyre looks like he said he had a fractured elbow. So hopefully both these guys can get healthy and this could actually work out and be a great feud because so far it's working. I think Drew McIntyre's got great promos. CM Punk's obviously pretty good on the mic. Not a big fan of CM Punk outside of the ring right now, personally. But at the same time, I enjoy his in-ring work and I enjoy his promo skills. So I'm trying to put my personal feelings aside. But everything Drew McIntyre is doing has been absolutely outstanding. So whatever this match does occur, probably sometime later on this summer, whenever these guys are healthy, hopefully sooner rather than later, because I don't know how long you can continue just to do this week after week and not pay it off. But looking forward to seeing it when it does happen, and hopefully they can keep the momentum heading into that feud whenever it does occur. As mentioned at the beginning of Monday Night Raw, we got the match of Liv Morgan and Nia Jax. We had Naomi and Tiffany Stratton kind of getting involved on the outside. Tiffany Stratton was out there watching this match. Obviously, Naomi, has her issues with Tiffany Stratton leading into Backlash, so they kind of got into it. But in the end here, Liv Morgan gets the pin clean over Nia Jax. Nia Jax doing the job, kind of like back in the old territory days, leaving one territory, going to the other, putting over Liv Morgan here, setting her up for Becky Lynch probably in the future. Don't know exactly when that'll happen or occur, but Liv Morgan will definitely be getting that title back before Rhea Ripley returns, in my opinion, as I said last week. But that could be a while, so I don't know how long they're going to keep this going. I don't think they're going to add this to Backlash because I think it'd be a little too soon. But you can maybe push it a little bit further down the line, depending on how long Rhea's going to be out. But good on Nia Jax putting over Liv Morgan here completely clean, and Nia Jax will then move on to probably face Bayley and some of those ladies over there on SmackDown. Nia Jax versus Jade Cargill could be a lot of fun. Bianca Belair. There's all sorts of things you can do over there on SmackDown, so I'm looking forward to seeing that little bit of a switch up. So yeah, for now, good to see the win here. Good for Liv Morgan. And of course, Monday Night Raw ended with the main event, the six-man tag, Jey Uso, Andrade, and Ricochet versus the Judgment Day, Finn Balor, JD McDonough, and Damian Priest here. So yeah, I mean, good match between the six guys. I thought it did a good job of doing one of the few bills they actually did for Backlash. I mean, they've named a lot of matches, but they've not really done a whole lot of storytelling when it comes to some of the bigger matches on the Backlash card, which is fine. A lot of times, Backlash after WrestleMania, it's kind of it sometimes is not a great show. A lot of times it's rematches from WrestleMania. So give Hunter credit here and Triple H credit for not booking just rematches from WrestleMania. He's actually putting new matches on the card, but they kind of tie into feuds that happened at WrestleMania. So yeah, and in this case, it was good to see Jey Uso get the win here in the six-man tag to build his momentum heading into Backlash. I don't ever really like when they use the word momentum in WWE. Just kind of sounds cheesy. But in this case, they're getting Jey Uso over as a main event player here, and you got to do that heading into the World Heavyweight Championship match. I really think that they've done a better job with Jey Uso heading into Backlash more than they have with Damian Priest after winning the world title. The World Championship match at Backlash between Damian Priest and Jey Uso is going to be a big moment for Damian Priest. He's got to come out and show that he is worthy of holding that World Heavyweight Championship moving forward. Because if he does not have a good showing at Backlash, even though I do believe he's going to win one way or the other, they could get cold feet with Damian Priest and put the title on Drew McIntyre, which I think they should do at Clash of the Castle anyway. That way, the title could be there for CM Punk whenever he gets healthy. Even though a lot of people, talk about how CM Punk should not be getting a title match since he's not wrestled much in WWE yet either. You can't just do that if you're going to do that with Mercedes Moné. You can't do that in WWE with CM Punk, right? Otherwise, you got to be okay with the Mercedes Moné. Not only that, I did kind of skip over it a little bit here. There was a tag team championship match tonight with the Miz and R-Truth defending their World Tag Team Championships against Otis and Akira Tozawa of the Alpha Academy. Someone explained to me what Alpha Academy ever did to earn that WWE or that World Tag Team Championship match. Absolutely nothing. So if you want to complain about AEW like having somebody challenge you for the TBS or TNT title, which Tony Khan at AEW has stated many times is about, it's an open challenge type of belt, so you don't necessarily have to earn your way in the rankings for those particular titles. If you're going to complain about that, though, and not earning victories, someone explained to me how Otis and Akira Tozawa earned a World Tag Team match against the Awesome Truth. But I digress. At least Awesome Truth quickly dispatched of them. So in that regard, it made some storyline sense, and it will build to the inevitable breakup between Chad Gable and that crew. But I just wanted to point that out. But at the same time, like I said, good to see. It was a fun six-man tag to end the show, no doubt about it. And like I said, leading into the main event at Backlash France with Jey Uso and Damian Priest. Could be a good solid match. I think Cody and AJ Styles is probably going to upstage it a bit. but at the same time, I think it's not a bad main event. It's like a semi-main, so to speak. So in a way, I'm looking forward to the match, see where it goes. Backlash has a decent little card to it, all things considered, especially since a lot of times, like I said, Backlash is not always the greatest show. But anyway, overall, I thought WWE in the draft this week a little underwhelming, but at the same time, looking at it overall about how many people actually did change shows, it could add some intrigue and some new elements to it. So I'm at least going to preach patience here and see where it goes and give them the benefit of the doubt. Because, like I said, I trust Triple H's booking a little bit more than I do Vince McMahon, obviously. So the real question here is, though, guys, what did you guys think about WWE this week? Were you impressed with the draft? Did you think it sucked? Did you think it was boring like I did on Friday night? After this week, I'm trying to give it a little more faith, a little bit more trust, and we'll just wait and see where it goes. Like I said, with all the moves that happen. So, comment below. Let me know what you guys thought. Did you want to see more big blockbuster moves? Would you have liked to have seen a trade, which would have added a little bit more intrigue to it? Never got that really that I'm aware of, unless they did one afterwards on social media. But comment below. Let me know what you guys think of everything that happened on WWE this week leading into Backlash. Are you excited for the pay per view? If not, or if you are, let me know. Either way, comment below and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And until next week on my next WWE recap show, catch me on Thursday as well for my AEW recap. Until then, take care and God bless.